The massive crystal building that housed the Galactic Council was buzzing with activity today. Alien voices filled the air, speaking in dozens of different languages as representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered for their most important meeting of the year, the Military Assessment Summit. This was where every major civilization in the galaxy came to show off their latest weapons and warships. Admiral Kim Hyun-woo stood at the back of the enormous chamber, trying to blend in with the crowd. He was one of only 3 humans in a room, filled with thousands of aliens, and he could feel their eyes on him. Some looked curious, others amused, but most just looked dismissive. To them, humans were still the new kids on the block, barely worth noticing. The chamber itself was a sight to behold. The walls were made of living crystal that shifted colors based on the emotions of the speakers. Right now, they glowed with pride and arrogance as one alien race after another took the stage to brag about their military might. The ceiling stretched up so high that clouds actually formed near the top, and holographic displays floated everywhere, showing off deadly weapons and massive starships. The Zephyrian fleet commanders were currently on stage, and they were putting on quite a show. Their ships appeared as ghostly blue holograms above the crowd, sleek vessels that could phase in and out of reality itself. "Behold our quantum phase battleships," their admiral declared, his voice booming through translation. "Devices. These magnificent vessels can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making them virtually impossible to hit." The crowd oohed and ahed appropriately. Hyun-woo had to admit the technology was impressive. The Zephyrians had been perfecting their quantum manipulation for thousands of years, and it showed. Next came the crystalline hegemony, a race of beings who looked like walking gemstones. Their representative, a towering figure that sparkled like a diamond under the chamber's lights, gestured grandly as massive holographic weapons appeared above the crowd. "Our planet crackers can split worlds in half with a single shot," she announced proudly. "We have perfected the art of molecular disintegration on a planetary scale." Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the audience. Even Hyun-woo felt a chill run down his spine. These weren't just weapons. They were instruments of complete destruction. The presentations continued for hours. The Vorthan Empire showed off their star destroyers, ships so massive they had their own gravity fields. The Obsidian Syndicate demonstrated their stealth technology, making entire fleets disappear from sensors. The Ethereal Collective displayed their mind control weapons, devices that could turn enemy crews against each other with a thought. Each presentation was met with applause, respectful nods, and careful note-taking. These were the powers that controlled the galaxy, and everyone knew it. Their military might was legendary, their technology centuries ahead of most other civilizations. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the council speaker stood up. He was a tall, thin being with silver skin and eyes like black holes. When he spoke, his voice carried just a hint of amusement. "And now," he announced, pausing dramatically, "we hear from the human representative." The change in the room was immediate. The respectful silence was replaced by barely contained snickers. Conversations started up again as aliens turned to each other, making jokes in their native languages. The crystal walls shifted from the proud golds and blues of before to a mocking shade of purple. Hyun-woo felt every eye in the room turn toward him as he began the long walk to the central podium. His footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet chamber, each step seeming to take forever. He could hear the whispers starting up behind him. "Is that really a human? Look how small he is. I thought they were supposed to be warriors. Didn't their last fleet get destroyed by space pirates?" The towering Vorthan commander, a massive being with 6 glowing eyes and skin like dark metal, leaned forward in his seat. His voice boomed across the chamber, not even bothering with the translation. "Devices. Tell us, little human," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Have you finally learned to build ships that don't explode during launch?" Laughter erupted throughout the chamber. The Vorthan was referring to humanity's early attempts at space travel, when several of their ships had indeed exploded shortly after leaving Earth's atmosphere. It had become a running joke throughout the galaxy, human incompetence in space. Hyun-woo reached the podium and stood there calmly, waiting for the laughter to die down. He was a small man by human standards, and positively tiny compared to most of the aliens in the room. His simple military uniform looked plain and unremarkable next to the ornate robes and armor worn by the other representatives. When the chamber finally quieted, Hyun-woo spoke in a clear, steady voice. "Honored Council," he began, his words automatically translated into hundreds of languages. "Humanity requests permission to demonstrate our latest naval developments." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The chamber erupted in laughter so loud that the crystal walls actually vibrated. Aliens were literally falling out of their seats, holding their sides, wiping tears from their eyes. Some were laughing so hard they couldn't breathe. Admiral Crixtal of the Zephyrian Empire was practically crying with laughter, his compound eyes streaming with tears. He stood up, still chuckling, and addressed the crowd. "Oh, this should be entertaining," he said, his voice carrying clearly over the dying laughter. "Very well, human. We'll observe your demonstration in 3 cycles at the Kepler testing grounds." The way he said demonstration made it clear he expected nothing more than an embarrassing display of human incompetence. Around the chamber, other aliens were already making bets on how quickly the human ships would malfunction or explode. Hyun-woo stood there calmly through it all, waiting for the mockery to die down. When it finally did, he simply nodded respectfully and said, "Thank you, Honored Council. You won't be disappointed." As he walked back to his place at the rear of the chamber, the laughter started up again. But this time, Hyun-woo allowed himself a small smile. If only they knew what was waiting for them in the outer rim of human space, hidden in the darkness between the stars. 3 cycles would give him just enough time to make the final preparations. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were full of surprises. Deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, in a facility that didn't officially exist, Fleet Commander Park Ji-hoon stood in front of the most advanced command center humanity had ever built. The room was massive, carved directly into the lunar rock and reinforced with materials that could withstand a direct nuclear strike. Holographic displays floated everywhere, showing real-time data from secret construction sites scattered across the galaxy. This was Lunar Base Control, the nerve center of the most ambitious military project in human history. For 20 years, it had coordinated efforts across dozens of star systems, managing resources and personnel with a level of secrecy that would have impressed the galaxy's best intelligence agencies. The room hummed with quiet activity as dozens of technicians monitored construction progress, resource allocation, and security protocols. Ji-hoon was a tall, serious man with graying hair and eyes that had seen too many classified reports. He had been handpicked for this position not just because of his tactical brilliance, but because of his ability to keep secrets. For 2 decades, he had carried the weight of humanity's greatest project on his shoulders, knowing that any leak could doom Earth to continued mockery and irrelevance. Standing beside him was Captain Lee Da-eun, his second-in-command, and one of the few people who knew the full scope of what they were building. She was younger than Ji-hoon, with sharp intelligence and an attention to detail that made her invaluable in coordinating the countless moving parts of their operation. In her hands was a datapad showing the latest intelligence reports from across the galaxy. "The alien intelligence networks are getting suspicious," Da-eun reported, her voice carrying a note of concern that she tried to keep hidden. 3 separate probe contacts this week alone. The Obsidian Syndicate managed to get close enough to Proxima Station to detect unusual energy signatures. Ji-hoon felt his stomach tighten slightly. The Obsidian Syndicate was known throughout the galaxy for their espionage capabilities. If they were sniffing around human installations, it meant word was starting to spread that something big was happening in human space. "But our stealth fields held?" he asked. "Perfectly," Da-eun confirmed with a small smile. Their probes registered the energy signatures as natural stellar phenomena. The new quantum masking technology worked exactly as designed. They have no idea what they're actually looking at. Ji-hoon nodded and turned his attention to the main holographic display floating in the center of the command room. It showed a 3-dimensional map of local space, with dozens of red dots marking secret construction facilities. Each dot represented years of careful planning, massive resource investment, and the combined efforts of millions of human workers who had been sworn to absolute secrecy. The construction sites themselves were marvels of engineering and deception. Most were hidden inside hollowed-out asteroids, their exteriors carefully maintained to look like natural space rocks. Others were built in the empty space between star systems, far from any shipping lanes or patrol routes. A few of the most important facilities were actually constructed inside gas giant atmospheres, where the swirling clouds provided natural camouflage. Ji-hoon gestured, and the display zoomed in on one of the construction sites. The asteroid's exterior looked completely normal, just another chunk of rock floating in space. But as the display showed a cross-section view, the truth was revealed. The entire interior had been carved out and converted into a massive shipyard. Automated construction systems worked around the clock, assembling vessels that dwarfed anything currently in service with any galactic military. "Look at this," Ji-hoon said, his voice filled with quiet pride. Site 7 completed hull assembly on the Busan yesterday. She's the largest destroyer-class vessel ever built by human hands. The footage showed a ship taking shape in the darkness of the asteroid's interior. Its hull was covered in a material that seemed to absorb light, making it difficult to look at directly. Robotic arms moved with precision, welding together armor plates that were each larger than most human buildings. The vessel was beautiful in a deadly way, sleek and predatory, designed for one purpose: to dominate any battlefield. It entered 20 years of preparation, Dayun, Ji-hoon continued, his voice growing soft with memory. Every human colony, every mining operation, every research station has contributed to this moment. We've had people working double shifts on Mars to extract the rare metals needed for our hull plating. The orbital factories around Jupiter have been producing components non-stop. Even our most remote outposts have been shipping resources back to support the project. Dayun nodded, thinking about the incredible coordination required to pull off such a massive undertaking. The resource allocation alone should have been impossible to hide. Moving that much material, that many personnel, coordinating construction across dozens of sites, any other civilization would have noticed the patterns by now. That's because any other civilization would have tried to do it through official channels, Ji-hoon replied with a slight smile. They would have filed reports, requested approvals, gone through proper military bureaucracy. We did none of that. Project Helios has been completely off the books from day one. The project had started small, with just a handful of visionary, military leaders who understood that humanity needed something dramatic to change their status in the galaxy. They had begun by quietly recruiting the best minds from across human space: engineers, scientists, tacticians, logisticians, people who shared their vision of a stronger humanity. The early years had been the hardest. Resources were limited, and they had to be extremely careful not to attract attention. Construction sites were small and well hidden, building only a few ships at a time. But as the project grew and proved its worth, more resources became available. Human colonies began volunteering materials and personnel. Mining operations started allocating percentages of their output to mysterious government contracts. Research stations shared their breakthroughs with the project teams. The crystalline hegemony tried to conduct a deep scan of the Sol system last month. Dayun continued, reading from her reports. Their sensor arrays are some of the most advanced in the galaxy, but they couldn't penetrate our new shielding technology. And the ethereal collective? Ji-hoon asked. The psychic aliens were always his biggest concern, since they could potentially read human thoughts directly. They tried to scan our thoughts again, Dayun replied with satisfaction. Commander Kim reported the attempt while he was meeting with the Galactic Council, but the new mental barriers held perfectly. They couldn't get past our psychic shielding at all. This was perhaps the most impressive achievement of the entire project. Humanity had always been vulnerable to psychic races because they lacked natural mental defenses. But human scientists had spent years studying captured ethereal technology, eventually developing implants that could block telepathic intrusion. Every person involved in Project Helios now carried these devices, making their thoughts unreadable to even the most powerful psychic aliens. Ji-hoon walked over to another display showing personnel reports. Millions of humans were now involved in the project. from construction workers to security specialists to the crews who would eventually operate the new fleet. All of them had volunteered for the most classified assignment in human history, knowing that they might never receive public recognition for their contributions. "Status report on crew training," he asked. "Proceeding ahead of schedule," Daun replied proudly. "The simulation centers have been running non-stop for the past 6 months. Our crews have logged more training hours on the new systems than most. Alien navies accumulate in their entire careers. They're ready, Commander." Ji-hoon felt a surge of pride as he thought about the dedication of the people under his command. They had sacrificed years of their lives working in secret, separated from their families, all for the chance to see humanity take its rightful place among the galaxy's great powers. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority communication. Ji-hoon activated his quantum communicator, a device that could send messages instantly across vast distances, using principles that most alien civilizations were still trying to understand. "Admiral Kim, this is Control," he said clearly into the device. "Project Helios is ready for demonstration. All ships are in position, all crews are prepared, and all systems are operating at full capacity." He paused, looking around the command center at the people who had made this moment possible. Scientists who had pushed the boundaries of physics, engineers who had built the impossible, and soldiers who were ready to show the galaxy what humanity could accomplish when they put their minds to it. "The galaxy has no idea what's coming," he added with quiet satisfaction. "In 3 days, everything would change. The laughingstock of the galaxy was about to become its newest superpower. The Kepler belt had never seen anything like this before. What was normally a quiet stretch of space filled with floating rocks and ice chunks had been transformed into the galaxy's biggest military gathering. Hundreds of warships from dozens of different alien civilizations hung in the darkness like deadly jewels, their hulls gleaming under the distant light of nearby stars. It was truly a sight to behold. The massive Zephyrian motherships floated like blue ghosts, their quantum engines creating ripples in space itself. The crystalline hegemony's diamond-shaped dreadnoughts caught and reflected starlight, turning them into brilliant beacons that could be seen from light years away. The Vorthon Empire's star destroyers were so enormous they had their own gravity fields, pulling small asteroids into orbit around them like tiny moons. Every major power in the galaxy was represented here. The Obsidian Syndicate's black stealth ships were barely visible against the darkness, their presence only given away by the occasional glint of light off their hulls. The ethereal collective's vessels seemed to shift and change shape as you looked at them, their psychic technology making them hard to focus on directly. Even the smaller civilizations had sent their best ships, hoping to learn something from whatever spectacle was about to unfold. The crews aboard these mighty vessels were in high spirits. Alien voices chattered excitedly across communication. Channels in dozens of languages, all eager to witness what they expected to be humanity's greatest embarrassment. Some had even brought recording devices, planning to capture the moment for posterity. The betting pools had already reached astronomical numbers, with most aliens wagering on how quickly the human ships would malfunction. Into this gathering of galactic might came a single, modest vessel. The HSS Soul was a simple human cruiser, no bigger than a shuttle compared to the massive alien warships surrounding it. Its grey hull was unmarked by the elaborate decorations and energy fields that adorned the alien ships. It looked plain, almost primitive, next to the technological marvels floating nearby. Admiral Kim Hyun-woo sat in the Soul's command chair, watching through the view screen as alien vessels adjusted their positions around the testing ground. His bridge crew was small, just 5 officers compared to the hundreds or thousands that crewed the alien ships. But each member of his team was hand-picked, and they all shared a secret that would soon shake the galaxy to its core. The communication channels were alive with alien chatter, and most of it wasn't friendly. Hyun-woo could hear the Zephyrian commanders making jokes about human engines that ran on chemical fuel. The crystalline hegemony officers were laughing about human weapons that fired simple metal projectiles. Even the normally dignified Vorthon Empire representatives were placing bets on whether the human ship would explode before or after, attempting to fire its weapons. "Look at that tiny thing," one alien voice crackled through the comm. "My personal transport is bigger than their entire warship." I heard humans still use buttons and switches to control their ships, another voice added, causing a wave of laughter across the channels. Maybe we should have medical ships standing by, a third voice suggested mockingly. When their primitive technology fails, they'll need someone to rescue the survivors. Hyunwoo listened to it all with a calm expression, his hands folded in his lap. His communications officer, Lieutenant Park Min-seo, looked over at him with concern. "Sir, should I block the incoming channels? They're being quite disrespectful." "Let them talk," Hyunwoo replied quietly. "They'll change their tune soon enough." The testing ground itself was a carefully chosen location, a cleared area of space about the size of Earth's moon, surrounded by observation posts and sensor arrays. The alien fleets had positioned themselves in a wide circle around the perimeter, their weapons powered down, but ready to record every detail of the demonstration. Some of the more cautious commanders had activated their defensive shields, though they claimed it was just standard procedure. After allowing the aliens a few more minutes to position themselves and exchange jokes, Hyunwoo activated his ship's communication system. His voice cut through the chatter, calm and professional. "Attention all observers," he announced, his words automatically translated into hundreds of alien languages. "Please move to maximum sensor range for safety protocols." The reaction was immediate and predictable. Laughter erupted across the communication channels. The Zephyrian admiral's voice crackled with amusement as he responded. "Safety protocols," he said, barely able to contain his mirth. "What could your tiny ships possibly do that would require safety protocols? Are you worried your engines might backfire and damage our paint?" More laughter followed, but Hyunwoo's response was firm and unwavering. "Please comply," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The alien commanders grumbled among themselves, but curiosity got the better of them. What could the humans possibly have that would require such precautions? Slowly, reluctantly, the massive alien fleets began to move back, repositioning themselves at extreme observation distance. Some moved grudgingly, others with obvious amusement, but they all complied. The testing ground fell silent. Empty space stretched in all directions, broken only by the distant glitter of alien ships on the horizon. The communication channels went quiet, as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Hyunwoo looked around his small bridge one last time, meeting the eyes of each crew member. They all nodded back at him, ready for what was about to come. He had trained with these people for years, preparing for this moment. They all knew their roles and they all understood the magnitude of what they were about to unleash. Reaching into his pocket, Hyunwoo pulled out a small, unremarkable communication device. It looked like nothing special, just a simple black box with a single button. But this device was connected to the most advanced communication network humanity had ever built, capable of sending messages across vast distances instantly. "All stations," Hyunwoo said clearly into the device, his voice carrying across space to hidden receivers throughout the galaxy. "This is Admiral Kim. Execute Daybreak Protocol." He pressed the button. For several long minutes, absolutely nothing happened. The testing ground remained empty, except for the small human cruiser floating alone in the darkness. The alien observation fleets waited, their sensors scanning every inch of space for any sign of activity. The communication channels came alive again as alien voices began murmuring about human incompetence. Some wondered if their equipment had malfunctioned. Others suggested that the humans had simply forgotten to bring their demonstration fleet. A few even speculated that this was all an elaborate joke. "Is this it?" one alien commander asked. "Are we supposed to be impressed by empty space? Maybe their ships are so advanced they're invisible," another voice suggested sarcastically. "More likely they're so primitive they broke down on the way here," a third voice added, causing another wave of laughter. But Hyunwoo just sat in his command chair, watching and waiting. His crew remained silent, their hands hovering over their control panels. They all knew what was coming and they could barely contain their excitement. Then, without warning, reality began to tear open. The first sign that something extraordinary was happening came as a low humming sound that seemed to vibrate through space itself. The alien observers felt it in their bones, a deep resonance that made their instruments flicker and dance with strange readings. Then the darkness began to crack It started as a thin line of brilliant white light, no bigger than a pencil stroke against the black canvas of space. But the line grew wider, spreading like a wound in reality itself. The edges of the tear sparkled with energy that hurt to look at directly, and through the gap, the alien observers could see something that defied explanation. A swirling vortex of colors that had no names, depths that seemed to stretch into infinity. The HSS New Soul came through first, and the sight of it struck the alien fleets like a physical blow. This wasn't just a ship, it was a floating city, a monument to engineering that dwarfed everything they had ever seen. The battleship was easily 10 times larger than the biggest Vorthan star destroyer, its hull stretching so far that it took several seconds for the entire vessel to emerge from the spatial rift. But size wasn't the most shocking thing about the New Soul. It was the way the ship seemed to absorb light itself. The hull was covered in some kind of material that shifted and flowed like liquid metal, drinking in the starlight and the energy from nearby alien ships. When weapons fire from the Zephyrian fleet accidentally discharged in surprise, the beams simply vanished into the ship's surface without leaving so much as a scorch mark. The alien communication channels exploded with panicked voices. Officers were shouting readings that made no sense. Captains were demanding explanations from their science teams, and more than a few commanders were openly questioning whether they were seeing some kind of mass hallucination. But the New Soul was just the beginning. More rifts began tearing open across the testing ground, dozens of them appearing simultaneously. The sound grew louder, a chorus of reality being ripped apart and reformed. Through each gap came another impossibility. Ships that redefined what the galaxy thought was possible. Massive carriers emerged next, vessels so large they had their own weather systems. Clouds actually formed around their hulls as they displaced the thin atmosphere of the testing ground. Their flight decks were bigger than most space stations, and through the transparent aluminum viewports, the alien observers could see thousands. Curved smaller craft nested inside like deadly eggs waiting to hatch. The destroyers that followed would have been considered dreadnoughts by any other civilization's standards. Each one bristled with weapon systems that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Some had guns that appeared to fire controlled black holes, others mounted arrays that crackled with energy that made nearby space itself glow. The most disturbing thing was how quiet they were. Despite their massive size, they moved through space without making a sound, like predators stalking their prey. Strike cruisers poured through the rifts in groups of 5 and 6, each one different from the others, but all sharing the same impossible characteristics. Some had hulls that seemed to shift between dimensions, flickering in and out of visibility. Others mounted weapons that appeared to reach through space itself, their targeting systems locking onto alien ships that were light minutes away. The alien fleets were in chaos now. Instruments were overloading as they tried to process energy readings that broke their scales. Emergency alarms were sounding on every ship as their computers struggled to categorize threats that didn't fit into any known parameters. Some of the smaller alien vessels were already beginning to retreat, their crews overwhelmed by what they were witnessing. Then came the flagship, and the sight of it reduced the mightiest alien commanders to stunned silence. The HSS Terror's Pride emerged from the largest rift of all, a spatial tear so massive it seemed to swallow half the testing ground. The ship was beyond enormous. It was an artificial world, a construct so vast that it actually had its own gravitational field. Small asteroids began drifting toward it, caught in its pull and slowly orbiting around the massive vessel like tiny moons. Captain Choi Min-ho stood on the Pride's bridge, which was itself larger than most alien ships. The viewscreen in front of him showed a tactical display of the entire fleet, hundreds of vessels now arranged in perfect formation throughout the testing ground. Beside him, Lieutenant Han So-young coordinated the positioning of each ship with calm efficiency, her fingers dancing over controls that managed firepower capable of sterilizing entire star systems. The Pride itself was a masterpiece of human engineering. Sections of the ship actually rotated, generating artificial gravity for the millions of crew members aboard. Massive collectors along its hull absorbed energy directly from nearby stars, feeding power systems that could light up entire planets. The armor plating shifted and adapted in real time, analyzing potential threats and reconfiguring itself to provide maximum protection. But perhaps the most impressive thing about the human fleet was how perfectly synchronized it was. Every ship moved in harmony with the others, their positions calculated to provide maximum tactical advantage while creating overlapping fields of fire that could cover every angle of approach. It was like watching a dance performed by giants, each step carefully choreographed and executed with flawless precision. The alien observation fleets were trying desperately to make sense of what they were seeing. Their instruments were screaming warnings as they attempted to analyze energy signatures that registered higher than anything in their databases. Computer systems were crashing as they tried to process scan results that seemed to violate fundamental laws of physics. Admiral Krixtal of the Zephyrian Empire was the first to find his voice, though it cracked with disbelief as he spoke. "Impossible," he whispered over the communication channels. "The power signatures, the energy readings, how did you build this? Where did you get the resources? The technology?" Other alien commanders began adding their own shocked questions. The crystalline hegemony representative demanded to know how humans had developed metamaterials that surpassed their own crystal technology. The Vorthan Empire's officers wanted explanations for gravitational manipulation that exceeded their most advanced theories. Even the normally composed ethereal collective seemed shaken, their psychic abilities unable to penetrate the mental shielding that protected the human crews. Through it all, Admiral Kim Hyun-woo sat calmly in his small cruiser, watching as the greatest military demonstration in galactic history unfolded around him. When the alien questions finally died down to stunned silence, he activated his communication system one more time. His response was simple, delivered in the same calm, steady voice he had used throughout the entire demonstration. "Humanity doesn't build ships. We build solutions." The words hung in the silence of space, carrying implications that would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy forever. The silence that followed the fleet's emergence was almost deafening. For long moments, nobody spoke. The alien. Commanders stared at their screens in disbelief, their instruments still struggling to process what they were seeing. Some were frantically checking their equipment, convinced that their sensors must be malfunctioning. Others sat frozen in their command chairs, unable to comprehend the scale of what humanity had just revealed. Admiral Kim Hyun-woo let the silence stretch on, allowing the full impact of the moment to sink in. He knew that everything was about to change, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. The balance of power that had existed for thousands of years was about to shift dramatically. "Now for the demonstration," he said quietly into his communicator. What happened next would be talked about in alien military academies for generations to come. The HSS Terra's Pride, that massive flagship that was larger than most space stations, slowly rotated to face a nearby asteroid. This wasn't just any asteroid. It was roughly the size of Earth's moon, a massive chunk of rock and ice that had been designated as the target for the weapons test. The ship's primary weapon array began to charge, and the energy buildup was visible even to the naked eye. A blue-white glow spread along the Pride's hull as power flowed through systems that drew energy directly from nearby stars. The alien observation fleets could feel the charge building up, their instruments registering power levels that shouldn't have been possible. When the Pride finally fired, it was a sight that would be burned into the memory of everyone who witnessed it. A beam of pure energy, no thicker than a pencil but containing the power of a small star, lanced out across space. The precision was what made it truly terrifying. The beam passed between two alien observation posts with less than a meter to spare on either side, threading the needle with surgical accuracy. The moon-sized asteroid simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris field, no dramatic flash of light. One moment it was there, a solid chunk of matter that had been floating in space for millions of years. The next moment, there was nothing but empty space and a few scattered particles that sparkled briefly in the starlight before dispersing. But the weapons demonstration was just the beginning. Other ships in the human fleet began showcasing their own capabilities, each display more impressive than the last. When several alien ships fired test shots at human vessels, the defensive systems activated automatically. The incoming energy beams and projectiles simply vanished, absorbed by shields that seemed to operate on principles the aliens couldn't understand. Perhaps most shocking of all were the manufacturing bays. Several of the larger human ships opened, ports along their hulls, revealing massive internal factories. Within minutes, these facilities were producing smaller vessels, fighters, scouts, and support craft that rolled off production lines like cars in an ancient Earth factory. The aliens watched in amazement as complete starships were assembled in real time, ready for deployment within hours, rather than the years it usually took to build military vessels. The demonstration continued for nearly an hour, with each human ship displaying capabilities that redefined what the galaxy thought was possible. There were ships that could phase in and out of dimensions, vessels that could repair themselves instantly when damaged, and cruisers that could apparently be in multiple places at once. Finally, as suddenly as they had appeared, the human ships began to disappear. The spatial rifts opened again, and one by one the vessels of the supernova fleet folded back into dimensional space. The massive HSS Terra's Pride was the last to go, its departure creating a gravitational wave that rocked the alien observation. Fleets. Soon only Admiral Kim's small cruiser remained in the testing ground, floating alone in the space where the greatest military demonstration in galactic history had just taken place. The communication channels remained silent for several more minutes before Kim finally spoke. His voice was calm and professional, as if he had just finished a routine training exercise, rather than completely reshaping the galactic balance of power. Humanity formally requests reassessment of our galactic classification, he announced. We believe our current status as a developing civilization requires updating. The response from the Galactic Council came 3 days later, a formal invitation for humanity to join the Inner Circle, the exclusive group of civilizations that effectively ruled the galaxy. 6 months after the demonstration, Earth was unrecognizable. The planet that had once been dismissed as a backwater world was now one of the busiest diplomatic centers in the galaxy. Massive alien ships arrived daily, their holds filled with trade goods, technology, and representatives eager to establish relationships with humanity's new government, the Zephyrian Empire, which had mocked human technology just months before, now offered exclusive trade agreements that would have made them the dominant power in human space. The crystalline hegemony proposed joint research initiatives, hoping to understand the secrets behind human metamaterials. Even the proud Vorthan Empire, which had never offered alliances to anyone, sent subtle hints about possible cooperation agreements. Admiral Kim, now promoted to Galactic Fleet Commander, stood in Lunar Base's vastly expanded command center. The facility had grown from a small research station into a massive complex that coordinated human activities across dozens of star systems. Through the enormous viewport, he could see construction crews working on the next generation of human vessels, ships that would make the supernova fleet look primitive by comparison. Fleet Admiral Park Ji-hoon stood beside him, reviewing reports from across human space. Admiral Lee Da-woon worked at a nearby console, coordinating with the growing network of human colonies and allies. Reports from the outer colonies, sir, Da-yoon announced, looking up from her display. 47 star systems have requested Earth Protectorate status this month alone. That's up from 32 last month. Kim nodded, studying the tactical displays that showed human influence spreading across the galaxy like ripples in a pond. Green dots marked friendly systems, blue showed allied territories, and yellow indicated areas where human diplomatic missions were working to establish relationships. The map was changing daily as more and more civilizations sought association with Earth. The Andorian cluster has officially requested military assistance, Ji-hoon added. They're being threatened by raiders from the Outer Rim and their own forces aren't strong enough to deal with the problem. What about the Centauri Trade Federation? Kim asked. They've agreed to our terms, Da-woon replied with a smile. Full economic partnership, including exclusive access to their shipping networks, in exchange for protection and technology sharing. Kim walked over to the viewport and looked out at the stars beyond. Each point of light represented possibilities, new worlds to explore, new civilizations to meet, new challenges to overcome. Humanity had spent centuries looking up at those stars and wondering what was out there. Now they knew, and they were ready to take their place among the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. 20 years ago, they laughed at us, he said quietly, his breath fogging the transparent aluminum of the viewport. They thought we were primitive, backward, barely worth their attention. He turned back to his officers, a smile spreading across his face. Today, they respect us. They seek our friendship, our protection, our partnership. Tomorrow, he paused, looking back at the stars. Tomorrow we'll show them what humanity can really accomplish when we put our minds to it. The future stretched out before them, full of infinite possibilities, and humanity was ready to embrace it all.